So about Wally. Wally is a character I kinda forgot about recently. He hadn't been mentioned in the story for a really long time. Wally's fight with Ippo isn't that far off from where the anime ended, if I remember correctly. He was definitely one of the strongest opponents Ippo had faced in his career, only behind Alfredo I would say, who was the guy who set the whole thing off with Ippo retiring. Wally is probably the character with the most visible talent and potential out of pretty much any other character, because before Wally fought Ippo, he had only become a pro boxer probably only a few months ago, or maybe a year. In only a handful of fights he was able to become the champion of Indonesia, and then challenge Ippo, who was in the top 10 world rankings. We as a viewer know what Ippo went through to get to that point. We were shown what Ippo had done from the very beginning in his boxing career. Getting anywhere close to the point Ippo had gotten to was nowhere near an easy task, but Wally just popped up out of nowhere and ended up trivializing the whole thing. For Wally, it took him no real effort to get to the point that he could challenge Ippo. He was a phenomenon that was never really seen to that extent in the story, but of course as a main character, Ippo managed to pull through. Actually not really. That kind of discredits what Ippo did to beat Wally. In general, I don't think the series ever has those types of moments, where a character just manages to win a fight that they really shouldn't, unless it's a comedic type of fight. Pretty much every fight or phenomenon that happened is explained in some type of way. But yeah, the big advantage that Ippo had over Wally was experience. I think it was straight up said that Wally had more dormant talent than Ippo, but the fact that he just did not have enough experience as a boxer was something that could be taken advantage of. Meaning if Ippo had faced Wally after Wally had racked up a few more fights, he had a pretty good chance of losing to him. After that fight though, Wally just kind of faded out of the story. He wasn't hurt to the point that his career was in jeopardy. Wally just wasn't ever mentioned again. He went to go expand his career, and I guess it didn't involve any Asian boxers we knew. Wally was more focused on American boxing, I'm guessing, since his trainer was someone who dealt with more matches there. But now he's coming back into the story. He must have done a lot of off-screen matches, because now he's ranked 3rd in the WBA, and he has a match set up against Ricardo, who is a current world champion. We just finished up Mashiba's match, so it's gonna be the next one coming up, or the second match to come up. Volk has a title defense match that same night before Wally, so they are currently training together to prep for both of their fights. And right now we don't really know what Ricardo is doing to prepare for the fight. Ippo and Sendo are going to Mexico to go watch the fight as well. It's setting up to be a pretty major night for the series, so I wanted to talk about it today. My predictions on who will win the fight, and what it might mean for the future of the series. Before that though, like and subscribe for future content. This is the unstoppable force versus the immovable object of boxing. Wally does have that loss against Ippo on his record, but honestly you can just chalk that up as a lack of experience, because that really was what ended up deciding that match. This fight will definitely be different though. Wally moved up really high on the WBA rankings. It was a really long time since that fight Wally had with Ippo, so the lack of experience Wally had isn't really an issue anymore. Probably 1 to 2 years since then, or even more, and he's preparing for the fight by fighting Volk, who's also a world champion. He'll be in the best condition he could ever ask for before going into this fight, but he's going against Ricardo, who has been the world champion for as long as we know. Ricardo easily has as much, if not more talent as Wally, but I think there's one deciding factor that will define the outcome of this fight. Of course I may be wrong, and Morikawa might just completely do something else, but I think the winner of this fight will end up being Ricardo. I don't think the fight will be a blowout for Ricardo or anything. I can definitely imagine the fight being a real challenge for Ricardo. What makes me say Ricardo would win over Wally is for one reason: how it will impact the story itself. Ricardo is meant to be this final boss of the story, and I can't imagine Wally giving off the same impression that Ricardo gives off. He's just built entirely different. In the most recent chapter, Takamura was talking to Ippo about it. Takamura asked Ippo if he ever got jealous of everybody getting title fights, because they are all people who he beat, but they are getting really far ahead of him. This conversation is also what influenced my thought process. Ippo is pretty much confirmed to come back into the story. So many characters mention him being stronger than before, and there's so many teases of him getting back into the ring. It wouldn't make sense if Ippo didn't come back at this point. When he does come back, he's obviously going to return to try and reach Ricardo. By that time, Wally and probably Sendo as well will have already fought Ricardo and probably lost to him. But then Ippo ends up getting his turn, and as the MC of the story with some training added in, he ends up beating Ricardo, breaking it back to that conversation he had with Takamura, and then maybe him fighting Miyata afterwards, with him challenging him to be champion. That would mirror how their first fight went pretty well, with Ippo challenging Miyata as an outsider. That's just what I think though. If Wally ended up beating Ricardo, it will diverge into a completely different path from what I imagined happening. For anyone who thinks Wally would win, comment exactly how you came to that conclusion. That's pretty much all I had to say though. If you enjoyed, like and subscribe for future content. Peace.